All right, let's learn the Vienna. So, e4, e5, and now knight to c3, okay? And the point is that in a lot of our positions, we're going to play the move f4 before we move the knight to f3. In fact, in just about every position. So first things first, we're going to start with the Vienna Gambit, because the Vienna Gambit is played after the move knight to f6, okay? And we go f4. It's if they take it, we push, and now their knight cannot move forward. It has to retreat, and now we have to cover queen h4 check, so we play knight f3. Here, black can play something like d6. This is actually the best thing that black can do to fight back against our center. We'll reinforce the center, and the computer-backed idea that I like the most here is if they take, I actually play queen e2. I pin the pawn to the king, and black's best move here is bishop out. And after something like this, we have a huge lead in development. We've regained our pawns. We are ready to castle queenside. You can play d4. You can put your bishop out to c4. You can castle. You'll have an overwhelming lead in material out already on the board. And as long as you don't allow queen h4 check, you should be in very good shape. The second thing to note is that declining the gambit is possible, but you have to do it with d6. If black plays knight c6 after fe5, knight e5, and d4. And now if black plays like knight g6, for example, we have e5. And now the knight has to go back to g8, and we have the same position, except we're not even down a pawn. So d6, we can play a variety of things. I like bishop out, de5, and not even recapturing, but rather castling with a threat of discovered check. Well, sacrificing the bishop with discovered check. So like pawn takes d4, for example, you have bishop f7, you even have this. If they take here, we have bishop f7, king e7, rook e1, and I mean, it's mate in a few moves, but more importantly, you're going to win this queen. It's very bad. So black cannot decline the gambit. Black has to decline with the pawn if they're going to decline, and here it's very straightforward. Now we bring the knight, and in this particular case, I like to pin the knight to the king, like this, play d3. We'll take at some point, like when they attack us, that's when we'll take. But then we will castle, we will open up the f-file, and this position is very good. Long term, we want to put pressure on this. We want to use the open f-file once we castle, and the rook will be open on this side of the board. But declining the gambit, you will get a lot of positions where they do decline the gambit, but in general, if you bring your bishop out to c4 or b5, then play d3 to not block this guy in, you'll be more than okay. Which brings me to the main line of the Vienna Gambit, which is d5. So if this happens, you take on e5, obviously, because you're going to attack the knight. Now they play knight takes e4, which leads me to the main line, and that is queen to f3. So, queen to f3 attacks the knight. Now, black has three moves here. The one you're going to face the most is here, then knight c6 and f5 are probably the two best, which are played the least. So if knight takes c3, I recommend you take with the b-pawn because I want you to rebuild the center with a move like d4. So I like bc3, and after bc3, a lot of games will go like this. Black will play bishop e7. Black can do a lot of things. I mean, black can play c5. If black plays c5, I don't recommend that you go d4, but if black plays bishop e7, I recommend immediately taking the full center, playing bishop to d3, and bishop e6, knight e2, something like this, and castling, and then long-term creating an attack on this side of the board if black castles. If black is very fast with the move c5, for example, then bishop d3 is still fine because this doesn't trap you. You always have the bishop here, and then this is just a trade and it's completely okay for you. This is not something that you need to worry about. So if they play c5 right away, I say, all right, punish them for not moving this bishop. Queen to g3. It's my favorite move. Very tricky to remember because now they can't develop. And some people here will freak out a little bit. They'll be like, well, what about g6? Well, now you're going to develop your pieces. So you're going to play knight out to f3. This bishop has a choice. It can pin the knight once it arrives on c6 and trade itself. Or if the bishop comes to f5, you can even offer a trade like this. Because again, long term, you want the open f-file. You don't care about your double pawns in the center because you get an open file here. You get an open file on the f-file in the long run. And you have a very strong pawn in the center of the board. So that's as far as if they take on c3, you have to deal with c5 or not c5 positions. The other two lines to know are knight c6, we'll start with this one, and f5. Versus knight c6 attacking this, don't take the knight, you need to pin the knight to the king to prevent it from capturing. And now what's considered the main line is black takes on c3, now you should take with the d-pawn because you need to open up your bishop and get developed quickly. And now the main line goes check and queen e4. This is a very common maneuver to trade the queens and get an equal position. Again, if they don't know the theory, you will never face this, ever. It's much more likely that you will face something like bishop e7 or bishop e6, at which point you should remember your ideas, bishop out, long castle, bringing the knight to the center, and noticing what in the position you can put pressure on, and how you can attack black's pieces depending on how they set up. So, if they go for this queen trade variation for the more advanced players, there's a cool sacrificial idea, bishop e3. If they take your pawn, you can sacrifice all of the queenside pieces and castle, and now you are threatening this. And if people take your bishop, then you have this, and not bishop g5 yet, but a gorgeous move, knight d4. The point is that you attack both of these pieces, and if they take you, you have bishop g5, and it's unstoppable checkmate on e7. So a very cool little trap there. You can play bishop to e3, and of course if they trade queens while life goes on, you'll castle queenside and you'll move on with your existence. If they play f5 in the main line of the Vienna Gambit, I recommend attacking the knight, now going like this, and here is the trickiest system. If black knows the move d4, well, they know what they're doing. If not, then you're going to go d4. But d4, I recommend sacrificing this pawn entirely. Queen to g3. If they take, the point is bishop to e2, threatening bishop to h5. Well, yeah, but you're going to sacrifice. That's the point. And now you're bringing in your bishop. You're bringing in the pawn. And black actually can't defend himself. So if king e7, you have this. If king here, you have e6. And it's simply losing. The king has to come forward, and you'll have a discovered attack on the queen. And if this, again, bishop to g5. Devastating attack. So bishop to e2, and if black plays something like g6, you can go bishop f3, knight e2, and castle. Remember this little bishop e2 trick. It's going to be very useful for you. And if black plays something like, again, bishop e6, you have d4 as well as knight e2 and knight f4, just going after this guy immediately, or building up a full center. Now, what if they don't play knight f6 on the second move? What if they play knight c6? Well, bishop c4, and first things first, let's look at the copycat variation, queen g4, which is a benefit of delaying knight f3, you attack g7. A lot of beginners here will play queen to f6, because it attacks this and, it defends this and attacks this. But here comes the magic. Knight to d5. And this attacks f6 and c7, but lets them go here, and they'll get excited. They're going to take this. So a lot of people freak out here and go, oh, g6. And this might look really good, but that's not the point. The point is knight to h3, and the queen is trapped. Literally just trapped. It can't go anywhere back. People will run their queen to the free square, and now you play d3, and you glue in the queen, and c3 is coming. A lot of black players here will play h5, and they will attack your queen. But you don't need to worry about that. If they attack your queen, you can just move your queen. Right? So now you have pressure here and here, and knight c7, and all of this is still a threat. This is just lost. You can run this through the engine if you like. But if you get this on the board, it's just losing. Now, there's other ways to defend the g7 pawn, like king to f8. If they play this or g6, I recommend sliding back and threatening this. I've had people blunder knight d4 mate. People will play knight f6 here, and now you should prevent knight to d4 by playing the move knight e2. Then you will play d3 and go for bishop to g5, and your position is much better, because they've weakened their dark squares considerably. So I get this, they can attack my queen, I'll slide over, and now I will play bishop g5 and queen h4 to try to win material on this side of the board. Of course, if they play king to f8, then queen f3 back with the same ideas, knight e2, d3, and so on and so forth. You can choose which way you'd like to castle. Copycat variation is no good. The considerably popular main line is to play knight to f6. This is just the two knights. And here I like d3. Black can play bishop c5 or bishop b4. Black also has the professional move, knight to a5. Here you can just slide back, take, and then try to play for a later move, f4. You can also play queen f3, and try to castle queenside as fast as you can. Just give the bishop, get castled as fast as possible. Against bishop to b4, I like to reinforce my knight like this, and then play castles f4, f5. But what you're going to face the most is knight f6 and bishop c5. And against this, if they take, it's like the Vienna Gambit, but they took it, and now we just have a good version of it. So a lot of people will play it like this. Knight f3, and now knight g4. Here, you just slap them in the face and play knight g5. Now, you're counterattacking, so if they play knight to f2, you have queen h5, and if they play g6, you have bishop takes f7 check, king has to move, and I think the most winning variation here is check, king back, and queen slides in. So they can't play like this. They always have to monitor this move. So a lot of people here will play castles, thinking that they've, defended their f7 pawn, but now we play the really nice move, f5. And this disconnects the bishop from the defense of the horse. Our bishop defends our horse from the queen, and knight f2 is met with queen to h5, and so here people have played, for example, h6, and now you play, well, you can play bishop takes f7, but knight f7 is nice, hits the queen, the threat of discovered check, and I've won games like this, takes, king to h8, and f6. Bye-bye, because after pawn takes f6, bishop comes with checkmate. If queen f6, this is mate in 1. So a very devastating attack, and you need not be worried about knight to g4. And if they play bishop to g4, there's the most important move of this entire thing, knight a4, okay? This hits the bishop, and you need to defend against the move knight to d4 with the pin. So for example, if knight d4, here there is capture on c5, take, and now you play c3. And what you're trying to do here is you're trying to make them take, and you have a very solid center, and you'll castle your king this way. So you'll play bishop, queen, and bring the king this way. You can castle this way, it's okay, but you need to not worry about the safety of your king. You might face something like an early d6. Against that, just go d3 and f4, just do your thing. Just do your thing. d3 and f4, knight f3 after that, delay knight f3, castle, you'll be in good shape.